All right. I am John Mashni here with The Intense Life, and I'm speaking with my great friend and film producer, storyteller extraordinaire, DJ Perry. DJ, great to talk with you today. How you doing?
I'm doing good.
Awesome.
Beautiful
Awesome.
morning in Michigan. We actually have some sunshine and some
Yeah,
warmth.
spring is actually here. It feels like it's been missing for a while. So, um, hey, thanks for jumping on. I know you and I have, gosh, we've known maybe how. So I think we've known each other probably going at least a decade or so.
2014, maybe?
I think that's right. I think you helped. So I knew Shane Hagedorn, and you kind of teamed up with him
Ashes of Eden.
to do Ashes of Eden. And I knew Shane, gosh, I feel like was it 2008, 2009, where he was trying to get Ashes of Eden off the ground. I remember reading that script when I was in law school. So whenever that was, 2010. And he was, we had conversations, and he was almost like in tears on the phone, like, how am I going to get this movie made? And I remember where I was is top of the 5th floor of the ramp in Lansing. I was leaving law school, and he was a friend of mine, and I was just trying to be supportive and helpful. And then, obviously, I think what happened is he connected with you, got this movie off the ground.
Yep.
You, a longtime actor, been in a bunch of movies. I know, writer, screenwriter, producer, and you just, I view you as like the head of the Collective Development Incorporated tribe. So, anything else you want to say that is a good intro to you?
I consider myself an artist, and film is a medium that I really enjoy ever since I was young. But I would say that, I'm very artistic in a lot of different areas of my life, some of which I can't monetize because my art's not that good, even though it's subjective. Nobody wants to buy any of the sculptures or my paintings or doodlings, probably, but,
Well, also a martial artist. I love that.
Yeah, that's an art, lifetime thing. I started in 7th grade, which was a few years ago. And, it's something that I continue to this day. It's good for keeping yourself healthy. I still play soccer on a competitive men's league. You ain't seen anything until you've seen a bunch of old men trying to prove they still got it.
What's the average number of injuries per game, DJ? What is it?
3.
Oh, God.
And usually, you know what? Nowadays, a lot of them are self-injuries.
Like no one's hitting them. They're just running, and then all of a sudden, it's like
I thought about 1 injury from another person, 2 self-injuries.
Yeah. You're like, I really thought I had a second gear. I really did, and no, I got to stay in first.
Blowing tires left and right.
Well, hey, one of the things I appreciate about you, and I've told this to multiple people, is you're one of the only film producers that I know that does 2 things. One, you always deliver on budget or under budget. Might be pennies under budget, but you deliver.
Yeah.
And 2, you actually have paid back investors, which is very, very rare, like to pay back any amount of money to an investor. And I think that partially comes from you, the type of person you are. You really are a steward, right? You really do care about projects. You do care about the people who invest in your projects. And I think you care about your team. And I think you also have the desire to say, or not the desire, the ability to say no when you, which is really hard on a film set. And it's not something that's fun, I'm sure, but you have that ability to say, no, we set aside, this was our agreement. And I think that comes from a lot of different parts of your past, right? I know you were a camp counselor. I know you've been in a lot of projects that are not your own. And I know that you understand, like, hey, we got to get this thing made, right? We don't have an unlimited budget, in what you're doing, but you also care about telling the story and doing the right thing. So that's one of the reasons why I love spending time with you. I love helping you on projects. I like seeing how you think about projects. And that's just, I think that's why you're rare in the entertainment community, and just the film community in general.
Well, as you pointed out, I think it's the martial arts. I think having been a camp counselor, when you're away on location, it very much is like being off at camp. And then being a soccer player and coach, that's the teamwork. The martial arts is bringing out the individual best in each and every person. And, I think it's about the ability to say no with a reason, to say, I wish I could, but I can't, and here's why. And therefore you take something that could just be a no and make it a teaching moment.
Yeah.
So I think if you just heard no with no explanation all the time, it would be different than when.
Be hard.
Yeah. Well, I'm also a person that, if someone else has an idea on it and it's the better idea, then that's the direction we'll usually go. If it's subjectively, they've got an idea, I've got an idea, it's not about who's more powerful, it's about who's more accountable. And that's what I am when it comes to the financial side of it, accountable. So.
Yep. Yeah. I think it's amazing. I think one of the things too I respect about you is you, as an artist, you realized, hey, I want to be in control. And so I think at some stage in your career, you said, I'm going to start doing my own projects. I'm going to start learning the business side and being able to basically take a project start to finish. I mean, isn't that kind of how I know you acted and then you eventually said, I'm going to start doing my own stuff.
Right. Well, in 1996, we formed Collective Development Incorporated. And Jeff Kennedy and I, who's my partner in CDI, he's kind of retired now, but we were writing and developing screenplays and trying to sell them around Hollywood. And we came close to a few options and sales and stuff like that. And then finally it was like, man, we'd really like to see this come to life. Why don't we just do it? Like you said, I had acted in a handful of films. And so I had some experience. It's like, I think I know what to do. And you know what? I'm just one of those kind of personalities. Growing up, I was the kid that organized backyard football, capture the flag, BB gun wars, you name it, because someone's got to step up and be the one that actually organizes. And like you were saying, it's not in me to sit around and wait for an opportunity.
Yeah.
Patience. I guess I gotta. It's a fine line, John, between, patience and taking the bull by the horns.
It is. It's tricky, I think. I think, though, you have this ability to build a team, because part of the strength of CDI is just the team that you have, the people. But also, I love what you said about give them a reason. Like, you can say no, but give a reason. Like, hey, we just don't have this, or we can't do this, or we have this location for this many days and that's it, or whatever it might be, right?
Well, and it's also, I tell people all the time, I'm a great person to oversee money because I'm not a real materialistic person. I don't have aspirations of, a house in Beverly Hills, or I will never drive an expensive car while I've got friends having trouble keeping their cars on the road.
So DJ, some of the projects, at least the first project that I was involved with CDI was a really cool project where you went out to Yuma, Arizona and shot 40 Nights. Mm-hmm. That was the first project where I was really felt a part of it. And now what were some of your prior projects? And then what made you kind of go into this like trilogy of biblical films?
Well, I had done... Well, the first movie that kind of, dealt with any strong aspects of faith was Figure in the Forest. It was CDI's fourth movie that Jeff Kennedy directed. And, that was about a couple that had lost a child and how some people can't refocus and get back into their work, and the other person throws himself into their work and their disconnect, and how does a couple come back together after a tragedy? And, even those early films were about movies that matter, entertain someone, but then educate them. And none of them were heavy-handed, but they also had very relatable topics and things that happened. So we started down that path. And as you noted, I've worked on other people's films. I was helping to produce, more or less line produce, and then act in a movie called The Book of Ruth that we shot both in Eureka Springs, Arkansas, and then in Bakersfield, California for the wheat field scenes and stuff. And that was with the Christian singer Carmen, and it had Dan Haggerty, Grizzly Adams in it, and Lana Wood from Diamonds Are Forever. Some of these were friends of mine that I actually called and invited onto the projects, from other acting projects.
Yeah.
But I wasn't in control of the money. I wasn't in control of the final decisions. When you're working on someone else's project, I'm kind of like a consultant. I will give you my opinions based on experience. And then whoever's accountable for the funding, they get to take that and make that decision. So I saw some things that were done very right and some things that weren't done quite as well, And so I took all that experience, and I had an inspiration about doing 40 Nights because I had been part of a big casting call, 6 countries, to play the part of, after Book of Ruth, it's funny because I actually had submitted for Judas to play Judas in this biblical film they were doing called In Our Time. And it was all about from the birth to the death of Jesus in our time, like a reimagining, so to speak. And so I thought, it would be fun to, play this Judas character. Well, when I did Book of Ruth, a lot of people complimented that I look like Jesus, at least the classical Jesus that people kind of imagine, usually sculpted. So to pick back up on that question, I had submitted for Judas. They asked me to read for Jesus, which I had already heard that I had a similar look from the Book of Ruth. And interviews, 2 or 3 different reads, and finally they offered me the part. And it was going to be a sizable film. I think they had Lionsgate lined up as the distributor. Easily the biggest paycheck I would have ever gotten as an actor for it. And then the main producer, who was already in a wheelchair, got sick and passed away. And like a lot of projects, that just kind of, you lose the visionary behind something, and it can just tank out a project. Matter of fact, I had 3 pictures I was going to do with them. One was the In Our Time. The other one was about Madam C.J. Walker, the first Black Negro millionaire, and also Henry Ford biopic. So anyways, in my research, the one area that I felt a real connect was about when Jesus, after he was with John the Baptist and baptized, he wandered into the desert for 40 days, 40 nights, tempted by the devil 3 times. And all this stuff is about a paragraph in scripture.
Yeah.
So it's like, what happened in there? This is a life-changing thing. And so that's where 40 Nights was born. And then from that, the second film in the trilogy is Chasing the Star, which is the story that most people are familiar with the 3 wise men. We all have the 3 wise men statues all over the place during the holidays, but who were these people? Which, you can only take different historians. Every person's going to have a different take. So again, this is historical fiction. I'm not claiming to be the end-all expert on it.
Yeah, it's a story, yeah.
Well, but you know what? It brought to light stuff like the Zoroasters. There's people after seeing the film, it's like, this movie is not about Christianity. Well, because there wasn't. The movie ends with, them actually going and trying to find this infant Jesus who's been born. So it's really less about that and more about these 3 individual men and what they went through to get to this place. And, what was inspiring them to go forth and to defy Herod, King Herod at the time, which, was the most ruthless, evil man at the time, which Ralph Lister did a great job playing in the film, by the way. And then the third film is about, it's called The Christ Slayer. And the name turns some people off, but it really is a play on words. And that's the third film. And it's about after Jesus dies and returns, he approached these strangers on the road, and there's again very little writing about why, and it just kind of tries to piece together and gives a what if or a possible. And so there's some cool history in there. It's taking stuff that hasn't been done over and over and over and over and over again, and really shining a spotlight on that, and trying to give people a little bit of a different insight or perspective. And so those three films in the Quest trilogy were very special, and they were difficult. I mean, they were a challenge. Our crew calls it having your desert stripes. You either got 1, 2, or 3, because some people were in all 3 movies. Other people were in one film. I got 1 desert stripe. I got 3 desert stripes because it was out in the desert of Yuma where they filmed Return of the Jedi. And even when you're shooting inside that window before it gets too hot to be out there and the scorpions and the snakes all come out, it was still rough.
Yeah. Well, I'll say this. I think to me, the trilogy, 40 Nights is beautiful to me because it's such a unique and interesting take on, the time in the desert. But I think it's a way where you go back and you have flashbacks and you really tell the story well. I love that the conversations with the 3 versions of the devil are just so interesting to me. And one of the things we talked about this years ago when the movie came out, but I found it very just fun and interesting to listen to the conversations with Jesus and the devil, because, sometimes you think the devil's going to lie all the time. And what I thought was the most interesting part with your script was that the devil tells the truth most of the time. He just lies 1% of the time, or he just twists things. And I thought even, the actors you chose to play the different versions, there's the devil as a young man or the boy, right? And then, a little bit older guy, and then the old elder man, played by your friend Rance Howard, right? I think that those conversations I thought were so interesting in 40 Nights.
Well, and it's the approach they take in the temptation, it's instigate with the youth, intimidate with the man, negotiate with the old man. And it shows kind of, the 3 different stages of life and their different ways that they go at it. And, the film's hard for some people because they don't want to see Jesus weak at his weakest moment. But I don't think the devil would have ever even tried to tempt him if he didn't think that there was a chance, even if it was a small chance. If he's going to self-impose weakness upon himself by being born into a human body, there is a chance. You got to say there's a chance, or it's pointless to even have it. Why even mention it? Yeah. And so by the time we get to, the Christ Slayer, after the resurrection, people love that Jesus because that's their Superman Jesus, so to speak. He's reconnected with the kingdom and he's very powerful at that point. So it's really, fun, but we also, it's tough because, every denomination, they can't even get along with one another, and again, we were just offering a different perspective to things based on the information that you could extrapolate,
Yep.
And again, you don't claim to be the definitive. That's what everybody, that's a big problem. They say the devil's in the details. Devil catches people up because they're going to argue over those details, and they're missing the greater parable, the greater lesson that they're trying to teach. Yeah. Always makes me think of Enter the Dragon with Bruce Lee. And it's like, if you focus on the finger,
yes,
it's all that heavenly glory.
Yeah, it's like a finger pointing towards the moon, right?
Exactly. Yep.
You always will get me. If you want to quote Bruce Lee movies, I'm always in, DJ. So
there you go.
Hey, let's talk through. I think really one of my favorite movies is Wild Faith, like, where you go from, it just shows the range of CDI, right? You go from making this like biblical epic trilogy in the desert, right? Now, and then you made this Western, right? Set in Michigan. And I really feel like just, it's such an interesting, fun movie. Actually, I'll tell you that, that's how you guys came up with my nickname, right? Is we were at your fort, and was it Jesse brought over the trailer, the director?
Yeah.
And so I was so excited. I was like, yeah, let's watch the trailer. And I have this great memory of, seeing the trailer, and then everyone's like waiting, right, to get the feedback. Like, what'd you think? What'd you think? And I was just like, yeah, I really liked it. I remember really liking your character, Ben, right? Because it was just a fun take on it, right? I thought you just had it's a very different character for you, right? So that was very fun. And then like, what'd you think of the tiger? Right? If I'm telling the story correctly.
Well, you were really surprised. Did I just see a tiger? A tiger? Is that a tiger?
Well, basically, I said, I didn't see a tiger in this trailer. Are you sure there was? Where's the tiger? Right? Isn't that kind of what happened? And then
I think you realized you saw the tiger, but then you wanted more of the tiger.
Well, I remember saying, like, guys, we got an independent movie, and I'm always thinking of the business side. I'm like, we're trying to sell this movie. We want people to buy this movie, rent this movie, watch this movie, and you're creating a trailer, and we have a movie with a tiger in it, and it's an indie movie. Look, let's not be like Steven Spielberg and Jaws and hide the shark until the very end, right? Like, we need to we should only show the tiger. What else is in this? I don't care what else is in this movie. You just got to put the tiger on the front, the back, the middle, the trailer.
Agree that if we redo the poster, because we've been doing that with new campaigns, that the tiger should be on the new poster. Get rid of Shane and put a tiger on there.
We didn't see a tiger everywhere. We're like, that's all I care about. I just want to see a tiger. Like, I'd watch a movie. It's a Western with a tiger in it. This sounds awesome. And so I was like, my only comment is more tiger. That's it. I just need way more tiger.
Well, and everybody in the CDI tribe kind of has a spirit animal of sorts. And so John revealed his. Ever since, he has been called Tiger.
But, it's funny, just because I think that movie showed a little bit of the range of CDI, right? It's not just like doing these kind of biblical movies. I think there's drama. There's a Western now. And I know you just shot a sequel essentially for Wild Faith, right? Or a follow-up series.
Yeah. To let people know, I mean, first off, Wild Faith is essentially kind of like an interracial Little House on the Prairie. The drama side is a Civil War soldier whose life is saved by a black soldier, and he makes a promise to the dying man to take care of his wife and young child. And we open the film with them living in the North in a cabin with Emmett, our lead character, who had lost his wife to sickness and whose father-in-law was the preacher, and who didn't look fondly upon, this colored woman and her child living in a cabin with his son-in-law, and then the inciting action is a circus train that wrecks. And that's based on some actual history, different time period where a circus train really did wreck, and the carnage from that, and what would happen if the tiger, escaped.
Yeah.
Now you got a giant predator that's in a different place, maybe injured, maybe scared. But there was also a nice, as a writer, correlation between a tiger in captivity, slavery, and then the freedom, of the tiger being released. So, I can't write simple. It's always got these complex layers. But it really struck a good nerve with people because, again, at Collective Development, our films are for everybody. We don't write to a certain audience other than humanity. And so, it's so funny because, different political circles might try to own certain things. So, we've got interracial, we've got guns, we've got this, we've got that. It doesn't fit. No one's putting our film into a box.
Yeah.
Except for that you're a human being,
Yeah.
And so the film was really well received. It's been seen by tens of millions of people. And that's what's encouraged us to do the sequel, Wild Faith Christmas, that is now in its music composing stage. We'll release into theaters in November. And during COVID, I wrote the season 1 for the TV series, 8 44-minute episodes. And I just got done rewriting those episodes to take place after the second film instead of the first film.
Oh, cool.
And if the opportunity presents, I would love to have the TV series made. But see, the thing is, I've had a few different opportunities, but I'm not giving up creative control and having it bastardized.
Yeah, I get it.
So it's either going to be done right or it's not going to be done at all. And that's how I felt about the original film, because it was originally called Wild Michigan, and we had a startup, and long story, but it went south trying to get it off the ground, and I put it on a shelf. And it wasn't until Shane Hagedorn was looking for a starring vehicle to show himself as a leading man, and he wanted to work with Jesse Lowe after their experiences on Ashes of Eden. And they convinced me to take it off the shelf and do a rewrite on it. And I'm glad they did, because, look at where it's gone now. And
it's cool.
And we'll see, I would love to see the series go, but everything's about funding. And then it's funny because, sometimes the funding's connected to someone that wants to do ridiculous things with it. And that's not going to happen.
Yeah. DJ, let's talk through the movie that's just about to come out, Harsens Island Revenge. Tell me about it. I mean, I know about it, but give me a summary of. I think the film itself is based on a true story, right? And it's kind of like a prohibition-era.
It's based on historic fiction again. It's a lot of true events and pushing them together, because a lot of the tagline for the film again is World War I vets going up against the infamous Purple Gang in the Roaring 20s.
In Michigan, right?
Yeah, the quick history lesson is the Purple Gang was a Jewish mafia based out of Detroit that controlled 80% of the illegal liquor in the United States during Prohibition. Capone was one of their biggest buyers and distributors. And so, they ran a lot of that business, and they were pretty ruthless in keeping control. Well, these vets came back from World War I, and the ones that came back to Michigan, a lot of them had shell shock, which is PTSD now, and they couldn't take the stimulus of the city, so a lot of them went up north. Those that had family or business nearby went to Harsens Island, which is an hour and change away from the city. You had to take a ferry to get there. And it was kind of a winter paradise, lodges and stuff where these guys would serve as fishing guides, hunting guides, duck hunting, stuff like that. And, occasionally, if they got sick or a boat broke down or they needed a little extra money, they were buying booze from Canada and then distributing it up and down the St. Clair. And they also would sometimes even, do a little moonshining themselves, distilling stuff. Well, it wasn't so much they're taking such a big bite out of the Purple Gang, because the only other company, so to speak, making more money than the Purple Gang at this time was General Motors, that was emerging, because cars were being done on an assembly line. Ford had figured that out. The price was dropping where citizens could, afford vehicles. And so it was really about just the insult, and so they decided they were going to put their thumb on these guys. Well, mob-like intimidation works very well on shopkeepers and people in the city. But these guys were the survivors of the Great War. The first time you saw tanks, flamethrowers, mustard gas. And a lot of these guys, the battles ended up in trenches full of sewage, fighting to the death with trench knives. So these guys were not intimidated very easily. And if you wanted to get to them, you had to take a ferry and go off your turf, which was the city, and come into, the wilderness, which was their turf. So there's your film right there.
That's cool.
But the movie, like I said, it's always complex in that there's lessons to be learned. The whole thing is a morality tale on greed, because sometimes in reaching for, fast money, big fast money, you can put loved ones at risk. You can fall into ruin. You can lose everything. And so the movie's also about that. There's a little bit of a hint of a relationship, a Romeo and Juliet, that's between a Jewish young man and a Catholic girl.
Yeah.
Which was frowned upon in the 1920s as well. People, you're supposed to stick into your own neighborhood, your own group of people. And all this came from a book by Karl Manke. It's the second film that we have adapted from a book to a screenplay. The first one was from a book called Hope from Heaven, turned into a movie called Best Years Gone. Totally different subject matter.
Yeah, very different movie. Very different movie.
But yeah, so it's Carl Wayan is our director. Carl and I met in India as actors years ago. He was the star of the third biblical film, The Christ Slayer. He played the blind centurion, Longinus. And we've been friends for a long time. And then he started getting into work on the other side of the camera. And we have been producing music videos together. There's a few we've got some music videos from a band called Shallow Rising coming out. It's led by the drummer Chris Adler from Megadeth and Lamb of God, and having fun there. But Carl's style is visually very exciting, sexy, it's slick, and so it was cool putting Carl on this project, because when we look at stuff from the 1920s, a lot of times it's black and white, flickering old footage. But you got to realize these people lived full colored lives.
Yeah.
And so, in this film, you step back in time, and it was quite an achievement for, Dane DeFord, our transportation guy, Shelley Perry, our wardrobe woman, G.W. Burns, our production designer, because every car, boat, plane, building is all over 100 years old. The stuff all was operational because people who love preserving history, literally, and that's the other thing that, for our films, I love preserving history. Our previous big film was Silent Night in Algona. It was a World War II drama based on the true story that happened at that camp. People don't know we had 700 camps in the Midwest that we kept German prisoners from World War II at.
Yeah, amazing. It's an amazing story.
Even Germans aren't fully aware of that piece of history. And so the nice part is that we captured this moment. And had we not made a movie of it, it would have been forgotten about easily. So, that's the other thing we as filmmakers are able to do, is preserve history in a way that most people take it, because less and less read. A lot of the locations don't exist anymore.
Yeah.
And so through movie magic, that's how people can pass these stories down. So Silent Night in Algona, again, very much a historical piece. Harsens Island Revenge, same sort of deal.
And this movie is out probably by the time people listen to this, it's available or out.
We shot most of the film up in Alpena, Michigan, because Harsens Island itself has changed. We did do some beauty shots and exteriors there, but most of the buildings and everything up in Alpena still existed and were from the 20s. And so we shot up there. So this Friday, we have our kickoff premiere and our first showings to the public.
In Alpena, right?
April 25th at the Sanctuary Cinema. And it's going to play at least a week and maybe longer because they already sold out. You know, most of the weekend is getting close to being sold out.
Really? That's awesome.
Yeah. And so then we've got May 17th. We're going to be premiering and then doing a run at the NCG Theater in Owasso, Michigan, which is where the author of the book is from, Carl Mankey. Anthony Hornis is from there, who is one of our producer actors. And then we're going to come into Lansing, Grand Rapids, Detroit, and then spread out throughout the country. We're already working on some other.
What's the, just so people know, the rating? Is it is it family friendly, or what's the kind of?
It's a hard PG-13 is the way I would call it. You know, there's no gratuitous sex. There's no severely harsh language, because it's funny, their turn of phrases back then, it would have been pretty derogatory back then, but now people might be scratching their heads going, what does that mean? You know?
Yeah. Well, one thing I would say too, I think I'm excited to see it. I mean, I've read the script, but I haven't seen the full movie yet. I do have a small role. I just want to make sure people know, right? Feel free to describe it, but I love when you ask me to have these small roles. It's so fun for me.
Well, the role is an important one. Let's see. How do I say it without giving too much away?
Okay. Yeah.
You're a person of interest that they think may have some information upon this Frankie Morganski, who's causing all the trouble for the Purple Gang. And so they decide to give you a little bit of an interrogation. And let's say that it didn't go well for you.
I'm sharing the pictures here so people can see it.
Yeah. And I will note that the head of the Purple Gang is being played by Don Most from Happy Days. Now, people that grew up watching Don Most saw him as kind of the comedic character in that show, Ralph Mouth. And, that was a blessing, and it was hard on him.
So, DJ, tell us, I think the movie's coming out. We heard a bunch of the Don Most part. I would say for me, it was very cool for me personally to do a very small scene with Don Most. That was a really cool story I'll tell probably forever. And honestly, it was a little intimidating, even though my face was, on the ground and I was in a compromising position. It was just a cool moment. And I think one of the cool parts of the CDI films is you do have these great connections that people would recognize some of the characters.
I like the senior vet actors, that have been around. I'm not about let's cast the flavor of the month, because that's, who Hollywood's into for the moment. Plus you get a big runaround. We give an opportunity for people not just to stay relevant, but to reinvent themselves. And that's like Don Most being given the opportunity to play the main bad guy. You go back to the Biblical Trilogy. That's what Rance Howard, who's Ron Howard's father, loved about the Biblical Trilogy and playing the devil as an old man. He said he got to play the villain. He'd always played the good sheriff, the good preacher, and so, his family was excited that it was the first time they had seen him, Bryce and everybody else, with a beard. They'd never seen Grandpa with a beard.
That's cool.
That he grew out for that, to play the bad guy. And so same thing with, Don, he's going to shock people. I think it's an award-winning performance. I worked with him the first time was on Man's Best Friend, another great CDI film. Bring your Kleenex if you're going to watch it. And so he does a great job. Yes, you got manhandled by a multinational wrestler.
You didn't tell me that. Yeah, I didn't know that until after the fact, or right before the scene. I was like, this guy's pretty strong. Yeah, isn't he national champion wrestler?
Whatever, yes, and multiple times. Hey, what is this? Gabe Dean for the wrestlers out there. And, what I loved is that because he was nervous. He's not more nervous about performing in front of the camera than any of his matches. But you took him outside and wrestled around with him, and he got comfortable putting hands on you. And it really made the scene great. Because,
it was fun.
Because you can tell when someone's pretending too much. And, it's gritty, it's real. And, it's a great part that you got.
Well, it was really fun. And, honestly, I was just super glad to be a part of it. I took my son with me that day. And I think I joke with my wife saying, Max will never remember what he did on a Tuesday, except coming to a movie set, and hanging out with the CDI crew. He will remember that for the rest of his life, because that was just such a fun moment and a unique moment, right? It was very cool.
Well, that's what every one of these films are. They're incredible journeys. I mean, audiences get the story, but we get the experiences of making them. And that's something that every one of them is a beautiful journey. Working with a bunch of artists, took 200 people to make Harsens Island Revenge.
Yeah. Well, DJ, I think we gotta wrap it up. But honestly, Harsens Island Revenge is the name of the newest movie. And why don't you tell people where they can find all the back catalog of movies and other CDI information?
Well, you know what? I try to keep everybody up to date with a blog, djperryblog.com, highly original name. And then all the films, including CDI itself, have Facebook pages. We have an Instagram page, which is Tribe, as in like the tribe CDI. So what do? A hashtag Tribe CDI. Yep. We have a literal website, cdiproductions.com. A good Google will usually find all the stuff. But, most of the films are on all the platforms, with the exception of Netflix has kind of gone to just their own original programming. But Amazon Prime, all the YouTube, Roku, Encourage TV, iTunes, Google Play, Pluto. It goes on and on. I can't keep up.
Well, DJ, it's been awesome to chat with you. I've always cherished the times that we get to spend together, and great chatting. And I would encourage people to go see Harsens Island Revenge and go see some of the older CDI movies too. There's some real gems in there. Depending on what kind of movie you like. There's probably every kind of topic from the trilogy that we mentioned. There's romantic comedy. There's
Lost Art. Oh yeah. Also known as Bigfoot, UFOs, and Jesus.
Yeah, very kind of just a fun catalog, and I think I'm a big supporter of CDI. So thanks for joining us. This is John Mashni with DJ Perry. Remember, there's no ordinary moments.
Thank you, John.